pleasing to you, like something you would like. And we're really getting pretty convincing bubble at this point. You could use this if you wanted to. A couple things I like to do still to make it just a little bit what I think's more interesting. I'm going to go ahead and load a selection. So on this bottom layer that up to this point I've just kind of kept hidden, I'm going to control click, and I saved it just for this reason, so I could load selections off of it. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to go ahead and fill this again with a gradient, but this time I want to pick this rainbow gradient here, and doesn't really matter. I can go linear, circular, it doesn't really matter. Pick one that you want to use. I probably will go with the circular one. I want more color variation, so that's pretty good. Just pick it. I don't want so much red. I want a little more even distribution of colors. So that's probably just fine for what I want to do. Then I want to come up under filter, and I want to go into, you could use the filter gallery, and that's probably a good way to go. And well, it happened to open here with distort. If it doesn't go to distort, and then go to glass, and you can play around and see what some of these others do. But what I want to do is take the original gradient that I've essentially got, the bands of color, and I do want to distort it into a really kind of a more random pattern. And so move the distortion all the way up, the smoothness all the way up, so that you're not getting any rough edges. Choose a scaling that looks good to you. I prefer it, again, probably larger than smaller, so I'll go up maybe that high. You can try some of these other blocks or canvas or frosted. I kind of like frosted a little bit. Tiny lens. That doesn't work for me. I'm not looking for that. So I think in this case I'll probably go with frosted, and I'll go ahead and click OK. So now I've got this really brightly colored layer on top of this underlying layer. And I do want to have this look like it's coloring the surface of the bubble a little bit. It's just picking up some color from what's being reflected into it, whatever. But I don't want it quite that opaque. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is leave it at this point on normal. And this layer here from my original bubble, this darkened layer, I'm going to control click on that to load that selection. So right now I've got what would be selected there. I will select my colored layer here, and I'll go to the layer, the selection, invert that, and then I'll hit the backspace key. And okay, maybe I'll do a Control X, cut it out. That's essentially what I wanted to have happen, is that now I've gotten rid of a lot of, I've made it much more less opaque and soften the color some. Now it's still a bit too much for me, so I will try one of these other hard lights or something. I could even try an overlay or a screen, but I'm going to lower the opacity quite a bit too, so that I just kind of get a hint of color across my bubble. Now, while you can see colors as they do cross a bubble like this, oftentimes you don't see them quite banded so much like this. So I'm going to load the selection off the circle, off my layer 1, control click on that, and then I'm going to go up to my bubble layer here, and I'm going to blur this a lot to get rid of some of this strong banding. So filter, and I load the selection so it's not blurring outside of my bubble's edges, and I'll crank this up quite a bit, so I'm just getting these kind of, you can see it in the update here, it's a much more subtle effect. and I like that a whole lot better. Again, got to decide now what I want to do with it. Screen probably works pretty well. Play with the opacity a little bit. That's actually kind of nice. Maybe I'll lower it underneath. And I do need to remember to turn off this layer because I don't want that layer to be affecting the look. I'll go ahead and deselect it right now so that you can kind of see what it's looking like. Move the layers around a little bit. That to me is too colorful, but underneath the bubble shadow layer, that's really looking pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and the layer here, that is this highlight layer, I'm going to control click that. Whoops. So I've got the selection there, and I'm going to fill this with white just so I've got a really strong statement on the highlight here. Now it's going to soften out and blur, but I'll go ahead and transform it. And I want to do it on a new layer. So my new layer will be this layer 5 topmost, and I just filled it with the white. Deselect it, and it's a little too bright, so I'm going to do a transform, hold down my shift key, and scale it down. Whoops, not quite that. Scaled it so it would be, smaller. Let me move in so you can see what I'm doing a little bit better. And it's a little more bowed than my underneath highlight, so I'll go ahead and hold down the control key and kind of stretch it out so that it works a little bit more with the bend of the highlight that I've got there. So I'm just kind of following the same contour, and when I get what I like, press enter to commit it, and pretty much there's a finished bubble. So what I will do now is select all these layers, not the bottom two, just these ones, and I'll go ahead and merge them together. Merge layers. And so now you can see I've got this kind of nicely translucent but colored bubble. If it's too colored for you, and now that I look at it, it really kind of is, I will go ahead and lower the opacity even more of the colored layer. Maybe something like that. Again, that's really a personal choice. Whatever you want it to look like, you should do. And I'm going to go ahead and merge these layers. And that's a pretty good bubble, I think. A couple more things I want to do, though, is I want to make a couple of more copies. So we'll do a duplicate. And in this case, I'm just going to do a Control J and do about 3 or 4 duplicate layers. Now I'm doing this specifically because in some instances bubbles, we think of them as round, but when they're flowing up in the water and things, they're not always round. So I'm going to come up here and using, you can use a couple tools. The most control is probably in the transform and the warp tool, and I'm just going to add some kind of bulge to it, like it's coming up in the water and flattening, and so it's not quite, well, it's obviously not quite as round, but I'll get some bubbles of different shapes also. So I'll come to the next one, another same thing, edit, transform, and warp, and some not quite so distorted, maybe only a little distorted on one side. So it's still mostly spherical, but there's a little distortion in that. Come to the next one, do the same thing, edit, transform, warp. In this case, I'll warp this side of it, give it a little wobble on this side, hit the OK, and then for the last one, edit and transform and warp. And again, it's probably, I will just bend up some of the bottom here, however much or little. It's kind of a personal thing again you want. I definitely don't want it looking square, so I'll round this off. Don't want a square top on the bubble, but round it off some.